So there seems to be a plan for 2026, at least according to the CFO of Jasmy, even though nothing I say is financial advice, and even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything. In a post recently, again, the CFO of Jasmy recently mentioned how, and I'm going to quote him, right? He said, in 2026, we will go one step deeper in redefining what data really means. I mean, of course, he mentions a lot of other stuff, which is quite frankly a little bit boring, but the basic gist of it is they're gonna, I think, continue to do what they do, and I think just to continue to do what they're good at, which of course we know that Jasmy is primarily focused on data storage. And also on top of that, we take a look at Junction, an incubation project under Jasmy that's focused on AI. So we already see data storage, we already see AI. That's the thing. Now, people like to tell me, but why is it taking so long? Well, first of all, I can't control how long I'm going to have to wait, but there's one thing I do know though, and I know that personally, when it comes to the narrative of data storage, it's not a market that is necessarily trendy like that. It's nothing that's necessarily going to be cool or interesting straight off the bat. Like, for instance, personally for me, when I first entered into this space, I'm not actively seeking projects that are focused on data storage. That simply isn't the case. It was something that I kind of stumbled along the way after I started researching more about, the space, basically. Which, if I understand the nature of a project like Jasmy, which historically, again, is really focused on data storage, if I understand the nature of that, I'm not going to be concerned that I'm going to have to be waiting. Hypothetically, the reason why is this. It's like, for instance, if I go inside a fancy restaurant, I'm kind of expecting that, you know what, I'm probably going to have to wait for quite some time to get the food. It's different than in the case of like if I go to Popeyes, which is my favorite fast food restaurant of all time, but I'm just saying it'd be different because Popeyes, it's a fast food restaurant, right? Things are meant to be hypothetically fast, hence the name fast food restaurant, at least to my analogy, right? I'm not too sure as to the name origin when it comes to that, but I'm just saying it's kind of in the name, so of course we kind of expect it to be fast. I can't go into tennis expecting ping pong, and I can't go into ping pong expecting tennis. So when people like to say, but take a look at this narrative, take a look at that other narrative, it already took off, or this narrative is gaining traction. Well, yeah, it's because some of those narratives are naturally just a bit more trendy and more cool. But when it comes to data storage, it's oftentimes viewed as somewhat boring. But I understood that going into this, in which case, if I have to wait for quite a while, I'm perfectly fine with that because it's kind of something that I expected I'd have to do to begin with. It's like, for instance, if I'm running a marathon and I'm angry that it's taking quite a while, it's like, yeah, it's a marathon. What did I expect? A sprint? That's not the case. So when it comes to the case of Jasmy, being focused on data storage inherently, it makes it a little bit kind of boring, some people like to say. But because of that, we have to keep in mind a lot of developers didn't really want to focus on the data storage niche within this space, which actually could have been a blessing in disguise when it comes to Jasmy because now the space that Jasmy is in, there just isn't that many competitors. Like, for instance, let's take a look at Filecoin. Of course, that's the most popular one. I would arguably say that Jasmy is probably the second. For third, I'd probably say Arweave and, following with like Siacoin and Storj, or should I say storage, but tomato, tomato, right? Some people call it Storj, some people call it storage, but it's actually spelled Storj. But yeah, besides that point, that isn't that many. Again, I'm just going to go over the list real quick in no specific order. Take a look at Filecoin, Jasmy, Arweave, Storj, and Siacoin. That's 5 that historically we know are very famous that are focused on data storage. Other niches out there, sure, they can, maybe gain traction and gain sort of this cool factor pretty quickly. We've seen that. But inherently, a lot of developers want to focus on that, which inherently also means that there's just way more competition. This space, more boring, it could take quite a while before the attention flows back in, but less competitors, right? Less competitors, more boring market, or exciting market, but a lot of competitors. To each their own. There's a balance, right? I believe in some projects out there that are in more interesting niches. Historically, some people like to say, like for instance, the global trade and finance space. Let's say in the case of gaming, let's say in the case of, we take a look at memes. Don't get me wrong, I still believe in those sectors too, but I also sometimes want to believe in a sector that's a little bit more boring, but then also at the same time kind of less competitors. Because if attention were to flow into a space that doesn't have that many competitors, what happens? There's just not that many to go around. In which case, the ones that are waiting, maybe they might see that attention. Who knows, right? It's like just basically waiting there the entire time. That's kind of the analogy that I have. So when it comes to Jasmy, I don't think it's necessarily such a bad thing that, the charts are not doing the best. In which case, the reason why is because even though Jasmy's recovery has only been almost 4% in the past 30 days, which seems again very disappointing, but at the same time, what that means is that Jasmy, it's over 2 times lower than where it was back in October 2025. Does anyone think October of 2025 was such a dynamic time for altcoins? I mean, I don't think about it that way, right? Jasmy just going back to where it once was in October of 2025, a time when it was actually considered bearish for altcoins, we're already over 2 times lower than that. Bitcoin is not 2 times lower than its all-time high. It's just not, at least currently. But I'm just saying, let alone compared to its all-time high, we don't even have to look that far. Jasmy is over 2 times lower than where it once was in October 2025. Now, if you want to zoom out a little bit, because sometimes you like to say, oh, when in doubt, zoom out and all that. Okay, I'll zoom out, If I take a look at it in terms of market cap, we're around 7 times lower than where we were back in December of 2024. But again, that's like slightly over a year ago. I mean, seriously? Like, okay, sure, Jasmy might not do the best, but if it could go back to those moments, I'm going to Popeyes, right? I'm going to celebrate. That's the analogy that I have because I love Popeyes. But I'm just saying, when I take a look at, let's say, in the case of Jasmy, people like to say, oh, if it just goes back to where it once was, it's a failure, it's disappointing. They like to say that. But I don't think about it that way because if I'm dollar cost averaging at these levels, hypothetically, and it goes back to those points, I mean, what is Bitcoin going to do? Is it going to do those type of movements? I don't know if it would, because if it just went back to its all-time high, it's not even 2 times lower than that. Like again, Jasmy's around 7 times lower than where it once was in December 2024. Bitcoin isn't around 7 times lower than where it once was in December 2024. But we'll wait and see, right? I mean, Jasmy is an altcoin. It's not going to have the stability, quote unquote, that a Bitcoin might have, or even like a Ethereum archetype, which Ethereum, it's an altcoin, much like Jasmy. But of course, Ethereum, it's just a much bigger altcoin. We take a look at the Ethereum ETFs and all this. It just has more stability, arguably. But at the same time, if they were to recover and return back to their previous points, Jasmy's recovery, hypothetically, in terms of percentage, it might be a little bit more dynamic because the pullback has been more extensive when compared to them. But that's just my kind of analogy, or my analysis, I should say. I'll be sure to make more updates moving forward. So hopefully y'all stay tuned for that. I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a very nice day. I'm out. Peace. Bye.